When a new friend handed me a bag of miscellaneous computer parts, well, there's only one thing I really want to do, and that is to turn this into a proper computer. My name is JSB. This is my tech department. Let's get. So the thing I love about this hobby is when people find out you like messing around with old computers, suddenly they find stuff hidden in their attic, in cupboard drawers and whatever, and they're happy to hand it over to you. And my friend Sarah, she's done just that. She had a clean out and she discovered this old Radeon GPU and this rather nice motherboard, which seems to have a processor and some RAM as well. Oh, and a 6-pin to Molex adapter, so that's cool. Now, the tech department is filled with lots of old parts, found parts, and just parts from systems that I owned a while back and have moved on from. I don't really like throwing anything out. I really hate e-waste. You may have noticed that as a theme through my videos. So I think today it'll be really cool to put this machine together, see if it works, and see if there's enough parts in here to actually build a whole machine without spending a single penny. So without further ado, let's get started and see exactly what we've got.
So let's take a look at the motherboard first. It is an MSI K9N Neo V2 board, which it's a pretty catchy name, I know. But essentially what it is a nice 2007 era AM2 socket board. This means that you can probably expect to find something like a Sempron or a AMD 64 or 64X2 chip. On board we have 2 gigs of RAM, although it's interesting that each gig is not separated into correct channels. The other thing to note, wow, all the colors. Mid-2000s boards, man. Mid-2000s boards. We seem to have thrown every color at it and nothing goes with anything. There is good news. Those capacitors look in good condition, and I have 2 other boards here in the tech department of a similar vintage that have bulging caps, but that is not an issue here. What is an issue, however, is dust. Lots and lots of dust. Now my guess is the owner of this particular board probably built the machine up, used it, and then never thought about dusting it, and then when they needed to upgrade, removed the motherboard, the graphics card, slotted in a new one, and carried on. Dust has settled in every orifice, nook and cranny on this board, and it's going to take a lot of cleaning to get it out. Turning to the graphics card, our ATI Radeon HD 5870 is actually a pretty brilliant card for the time. Released in 2009, this was at one point the top spec ATI card you could get until the 5900 series was released. Like our motherboard, the graphics card is encrusted with dust and is going to need to be disassembled to be cleaned thoroughly. So where to begin? Well, let's start by taking the memory out of the board and putting that safe. With the board on the table, it's actually fairly simple to get the memory out, and I have a quick check and discover it's Kingston memory, so it's a pretty good make, and it's good for about 800 megahertz, so very nice. Interestingly, as noted before, the memory was in 2 separate channels, which is unusual. Normally you'd match green to green or orange to orange. This one was green and orange. Normally we don't have the colors, so, you know. Next up, let's turn our attention to the cooler. This is a standard AMD stock cooler, probably came with the processor, and getting off is fairly simple. I pull the lever towards me and hook it from the back, and then it should just lift away fairly easily. And it does. We're this much closer to discovering what our CPU is. Well, once I get the IPA on it at any rate. With the CPU exposed, I check it and discover it, yeah, that's actually pretty crunchy. And look at all that dust. There's nothing for it. I have to get the old anti-static brushes out and, well, start. Here's a little bit of a time lapse, and you can see how that dust starts to build up. And this is only the first layer of it seems, because it just keeps coming. No sooner as I cleaned one corner, then another corner needs attention, and so on and so forth. Next up, the IPA is out, and I discover our processor is an AMD 64X2 4400. That's not a bad processor, not bad. Turning to the heatsink, well, oh dear God, it is disgusting. There's no two ways about it. It's disgusting. It is completely and utterly clogged. In fact, despite the copious amounts of brushing I did there, I actually had to go swill it out eventually in the sink. The fan likewise is completely encrusted in it, but with a little effort, I do manage to get it back into a serviceable condition. Turning to the graphics card and stripping this down is a fairly simple process. Undo the 4 retaining screws on the back of it and the heatsink lifts away. As you'd expect, there's plenty of dust in here too, but unlike our CPU, the thermal paste is actually still in pretty good condition. However, I will make sure that we get a fresh coat of it on there because this card puts out a lot of heat. Annoyingly, as the system starts going back together, I run out of thermal paste. Now, I do manage to scrape enough onto the CPU to be at least able to test it, but I will have to come back and sort that at a later date. Memory-wise, I click them back in, and you may note I put them both in the green channels this time. And now, it's on to the case, and this is where things start to go wrong really badly. You see, this case is not the one I intended to use. I had a wonderful black case that was going to be perfect for this machine, and it was too small. So what I've got to do now is take the system that's inside this machine out of it, inside this case, and this system is actually broken. It has a problem with one of the CPU pins, and I can't fix it. It's broken off, which is causing issues with the memory. So it's just a matter of taking this all out and putting our new machine inside it, more or less. I have to say my table is not ideal for this purpose, as it's just slightly too tall for me to actually get in there properly. I'll have to get one of those moving tables. That'll be cool. Now, as the machine goes together, I start to struggle because with these early machines, it's very difficult to hook up the front panels. And you can see there, what I'm actually doing is hooking up the front panels as best I can before I discover that's not the jumper I should be attaching it to. That's actually further forward. Apparently, they have a jumper 11 and a jumper 1 that look almost identical. Power is provided by a Corsair CX600 that I had lying around, and it's a perfect thing for this machine. Now, whilst the case is not my ideal, it is actually really great to work in. There is so much room inside the case, it's very easy to route your cables through so that you don't cause too much obstruction for airflow, and I get the feeling that airflow is going to be very important. With a hard drive installed, I found an old 250 gig one. It's finally time to sort out that graphics card, which, as always, needs another slot opened, but not where you had the last card. So the machine is back together, and it's time to test. Will it work, or will it fail? We just don't know. Either way, let's find out. Very gently, I push the button, and here we go. And nothing has happened. And on that note, maybe it's a good time to mention today's sponsor, PCBWay. We all know that PCBWay make fantastic PCB boards, starting from just $5, and include things like, well, getting a replacement board for this old ZX Spectrum. What happens if your 3D printer isn't up to the task? Or you're having a little trouble with your CNC machine? Then look no further than PCBWay. In fact, if you can design it, PCBWay can help make it a reality. PCBWay, way more than just PCBs. For more information, check out the link in the description below. Okay, so it's good news, bad news time. The good news is, look, it's alive. The bad news is it's as blind as a bat. I have no image coming on the TV. It's not outputting, so I suspect our GPU may not be in the best of health. We're not getting the BIOS. In fact, we're not getting much of anything displayed. Now, to confirm this, I have a second card that I can check. An old NVIDIA 680, I think. Should be fine. And let's see if that helps. For the next hour and a half, I spend time swapping pieces in and out of different machines. The NVIDIA 680 produced no image with our motherboard, which led me to believe that the motherboard was faulty. To double check, I plugged in the Radeon graphics card into a Windows Vista machine and it worked fine. Although, I'll be honest, it was a struggle getting that in there. Next up, I figured it must be either the CPU or the motherboard, so the tech department being the tech department, I managed to source a replacement working CPU to try in the board, and again, no dice. To double check, I checked the original CPU in a different board and that worked fine. So I now know that the CPUs and GPUs with this machine were working perfectly. It could be only one thing then, the motherboard was toast. Feeling dejected, I went to grab my coat and head home to mull over the day's exertions and feel generally sad for myself.
Hang on a minute, lads. I've got a great idea.
The next day, I arrived back at the tech department full of vim and vigour. I have an idea and I'm not afraid to use it, and so I actually stripped the machine back, take it to pieces and reconstruct it once again. The processor has been placed back in its original motherboard, the graphics card rescued from our Windows Vista machine, and it's all put together and yeah. Does it work? Well, the red light tells you something. Yes, from the ashes of defeat, I have managed to get the machine up and running, which I will talk more about a little later, but for now, there's only one thing I need to do, and that is show off this wonderful start screen and try out a little bit of software. As expected, Windows 7 works perfectly on this machine, and there's only one bit of software I want to test with it. That's right, Flight Sim 2004. Now, in fairness, this machine is probably a little bit of overkill for Flight Sim 2004, but flight simulators have always been a great way to test out a machine, and this is no different. Despite only requiring a 450MHz CPU and an 8MB 3D card, this machine is still going to be pushed quite to its limits. I turn everything up to 11 and load up the sim, ready at Seattle, and yeah, actually the Radeon HD 5870 makes short work of it. With frame rates averaging between 25 and 30 at Seattle, it's the flight simmer's panacea, or at least it was back in 2004. From what I can remember, it was very hard to get a smooth frame rate. Nonetheless, our machine does wonderfully, and our 747 climbs high above Seattle on its way to the rest of Washington state. All that's left to do now is sit back and relax our enjoyable flight, and then let's talk about what the problem actually was with this machine. Well, our machine is back together and I couldn't be happier. You won't believe what the problem was, and I'll tell you all about that in a minute. First though, I feel I should probably address the elephant in the room. This is not the case I intended to build in, or did indeed build in. Now, there's a good reason for that. It's actually that I really didn't want to use that case. My original idea was to use a case not much bigger than this, and as it turns out, the machine, because this is a full-size ATX board, wouldn't fit in that case. So I felt I had to compromise and use what I had on hand. But that case, whilst it's incredibly sturdy, has been battered and bruised throughout its life, and it's set for full restoration sometime next year with a new project. However, I did remember that I had this old machine sitting in a bar, of all places. It had been used by me as a karaoke machine, and we weren't doing karaoke anymore at the moment, so I brought it home and gave it a good clean. As it happens, the system that was in there, well, that actually needs a recapping, judging by the bulging caps that I noticed taking that motherboard out. However, you want to know why it's fixed and how it's fixed. Well, as it happens, it's something so ridiculously easy, I can't believe it didn't occur to me first. I was all but done, ready to admit defeat. The motherboard was fried, and I was heading out at the door. And then I thought, just one more thing. I'll reset the CMOS instructions. And sure enough, resetting the CMOS battery, clearing the BIOS there, it did the job. Once I'd set the jumper back to normal, it actually burst into life, and the machine has worked ever since. Now, I'm incredibly happy about that, because it means that I have this wonderful machine as part of the Tech Department collection to go with our Windows XP machine that we found on the street and our Windows Vista machine that I had for many, many years.
The question is that I imagine a lot of people ask is, why save this one? What makes the Athlon 64 X2 worth saving? Well, the answer is probably not a lot. These machines are next to worthless at the moment. But then, so were the Pentiums 10 years ago, the original Pentium machines, and the 486s. And 10 years before that, Amigas were 10 a penny as people were giving them away to upgrade to the new Pentium machines. Before that, people were handing out Spectrums, and C64s were begging on the street, just hoping to get one more game as the 16-bit revolution took hold. The point I'm making is that just because this machine is worthless now, well, eventually it'll be worth something to someone. And in 30 years' time, you'll end up in a room filled with machines that you had and gave away. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. All that's left to do now is to say thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. Down below you'll find our usual social media things. And when it comes to mystery bags, maybe it's best to say yes to the mystery, and you never know, you might end up with your own box of wonder. My name is Jesby, this is my tech department. Let's get